Hey everyone, so this video is going to be about who St. Patrick was and what he did that gets him a day of his own that's remembered throughout history. The thing that I always heard from tradition is that he drove out all the snakes in Ireland. That was one of his miracles that got him the sainthood. To be titled a saint in Roman Catholicism, you have to have at least two miracles under your belt, not three, as the movie The Saint that Val Kilmer presented. Just two, which is pretty fun. So one of them I heard for him was that he drove out all the snakes in Ireland. Uh, no idea the validity of that historically, but I do want to share some things that I think are really powerful and profound about who he was and what he did that likely should be things worth remembering and thinking about, just for encouragement to know what the saints have done in the past through the power of the Lord. So it's from this book, George G. Hunnter III. Well, that's not the name of the book, that's the author. The Celtic Way of Evangelism, How Christianity Can Reach the West Again. So I'm just going to read the intro on this to you. A little story time with Andy Rasman. This is basically just the preface, or the first chapter. Well, the preface in the first chapter, which is the gospel to the Irish. All right? Actually, no, I'm not going to read the preface. I'm just going to read the first chapter, the gospel to the Irish. I'm not reading the whole chapter, so don't get too bored on me, okay? I'm just reading the highlights, what you need to know to get the full thing. During his years of enslavement, Patrick, he was enslaved. Let's probably back up a little bit more. When Patrick was 16, a band of Celtic pirates from Ireland invaded the region. They captured Patrick and many other young men, forced them onto a ship, sailed to Ireland, sold them into slavery. The pirates took Patrick to a prosperous tribal chief and druid named Miliuk, who put Patrick to work herding cattle. He was growing up in northeast England. All right, so there we go. During these years of enslavement, Patrick experienced three profound changes. First, the periods when Patrick was isolated in the wilderness herding cattle connected him with what theologians call the natural revelation of God. He sensed with the winds, the seasons, the creatures, and the nights under the stars the presence of God. He identified this presence with the triune God he had learned about in the Catechism. In his more or less autobiographical declaration, Patrick tells us, "After I had arrived in Ireland, I found myself pasturing flocks daily, and I prayed a number of times each day. More and more the love and fear of God came to me, and faith grew and my spirit was exercised, until I was praying up to 100 times every day, and in the night nearly as often." Second, Patrick changed in another way during the periods he spent with his captors in their settlement. He came to understand the Irish Celtic people and their language and culture. Third, Patrick came to love his captors. One night, after 6 years of captivity, a voice spoke to Patrick in a dream saying, "You are going home. Look, your ship is ready." He eventually returned to his people in England. He trained for the priesthood, perhaps in Rome or in Gaul, more likely in England. One night, at the age of 48, already past the man's life expectancy in the 5th century, Patrick experienced another dream that was to change his life again. An angel named Victor approached him with letters from his former captors in Ireland. As he read one of the letters, he imagined in that moment that he heard the voice of those very people who were near the wood of Focalt, and they cried out as with one voice, "We appeal to you, holy servant boy, to come and walk among us." He interpreted the dream as his Macedonian call. Patrick was ordained a bishop and appointed to Ireland as history's first missionary as history's first missionary bishop. The tradition tells us that he arrived in Ireland with a modest entourage of priests, seminarians, and others in AD 432. Patrick's mission was unprecedented because the Irish Celtic peoples were barbarians. The oldest and most perennial issue in the history of Christianity's world mission hangs upon two terms, Christianizing and civilizing. All right, I'm going to skip over some of that stuff. Got some here underlined, a more decent and English way of living. All right. Even in countries with a high culture such as India and China, European missionaries stressed the civilizing objective as much as their brethren in primitive regions because they regarded the local culture as degenerate and superstitious, a barrier to Christianization. Interesting. The perspective of the ancient Roman Christian leaders can be baldly stated in two sentences. One, Roman Christian leaders assumed that a population had to be civilized enough already to be Christianized, that is, that some degree of civilization was a prerequisite to Christianization. Two, once a sufficiently civilized population became Christian, they were expected in time to read and speak Latin, to adopt other Roman customs, and to do church the Roman way. This Roman perspective seems to have surfaced in the 2nd century and then prevailed until the time of Patrick. The 1st century apostolic movement reached several peoples, at least who were neither civilized nor subsequently Romanized. The apostolic tradition reports, for instance, that Andrew planted Christianity among barbarian populations of Scythia, that Thomas reached Parthians and Syrians, and that Matthew's martyrdom ignited a Christian movement in a cannibal population and anthropophagy. From the 2nd century, however, historians report no organized missions to the barbarian people, such as the Celts, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Franks, the Frisians, the Huns, and the Vikings, who lived at the fringes of the Roman Empire. By now, the church assumed that reaching barbarians was impossible. Why did the Roman Church regard the Irish Celts as barbarians? Ireland was geographically isolated from the Roman Empire. Rome had never conquered or controlled Ireland or even placed a Roman colony there. In Patrick's time, the British Isles featured several Celtic peoples, most notably the Britons, in which is now England, the Picts in what is now Scotland, and the Irish for the Scots in Ireland. So the Romans had observed some Celtic peoples historically. Indeed, Julius Caesar had even written about them. The Irish Celts did not read and write and were not interested. The Irish were emotional people, volatile personalities, known for letting the full range of human emotions get out of control. This is what was recorded about them in Roman history here. This may be actually what Julius Caesar wrote, I believe. I'm skipping around the chapters. You don't have to hear the whole thing. The Irish were emotional people, volatile personalities, known for letting the full range of human emotions get out of control. The Romans virtually equated being civilized with emotional control. All the Celts, in warfare, all the Celts stripped before battle and rushed their enemy naked, carrying sword and shield, but wearing only sandals and torque, a twisted golden neck ornament, while howling, and it seemed possessed by demons. Ireland was populated by about 150 Twaths, extended tribes, each tribe fiercely loyal to its tribal king. By Patrick's time, all of the tribes spoke the same language that Patrick had learned while a slave, and they now shared more or less the same culture, so Patrick understood them. In fact, the fact that Patrick understood the people and their language, their issues, and their ways serves as the most strategically significant single insight that was to drive the wider expansion of Celtic Christianity, and stands as perhaps our greatest single learning from this movement. There is no shortcut to understand the people. When you understand the people, you will often know what to say and do and how. When the people know that the Christians understand them, they infer that maybe the high God understands them too. Philosophically, the Irish were accustomed to paradox, which prepared them to appreciate some of Christianity's central truth claims. Their belief that ultimate reality is complex, and their fascination with rhetorical triads and the number 3 opened them to Christianity's triune God. The Irish people's love for heroism, stories, and legends like Christianity. No other religion could have engaged the Irish people's love for heroism, stories, and legends like Christianity. Some of Christianity's values and virtues essentially matched or fulfilled ideals in Irish piety and folklore. Christianity fueled and amplified the Irish love for learning and adapted to the Irish preference for oral tradition and memorizing rather than writing and reading. Upon arrival at a tribal settlement, Patrick would engage the king and other opinion leaders, hoping for their conversion or at least their clearance to camp near the people and form into a community of faith adjacent to the tribal settlement. The team would meet the people, engage them in conversation and ministry, and look for people who appeared receptive. They would pray for sick people and for possessed people, and they would counsel people and mediate conflicts. On at least one occasion, Patrick blessed a river and prayed for the people to catch more fish. They would engage in some open-air speaking, probably employing parable, story, poetry, song, visual symbols, visual arts, and perhaps drama to engage the Celtic people's remarkable imaginations. Often we think Patrick would receive the people's questions and then speak to those questions collectively. One band member or another would probably join with each responsive person to reach out to relatives and friends. The mission team typically spent weeks or even months as a ministering community of faith within the tribe. The church that emerged within the tribe would have been astonishingly indigenous. If God blessed the efforts of Patrick's band and the people responded in faith, they built a church. When the apostolic entourage moved on, Patrick would leave one of his protégés behind to be the new church's priest, leaving with him a textbook of elementary Christian instruction. That's all I got, but that chapter goes on for another 2 or 3. Actually, maybe I'll read a little bit more. An ancient document called the Annals of the Four Masters reports that Patrick's mission planted about 700 churches, and that Patrick ordained perhaps 1,000 priests. Within his lifetime, 30 to 40 or more of Ireland's 150 tribes became substantially Christian. That's really good stuff. And this book here, I haven't read the whole thing, but pretty fun stuff, taking the idea of what Patrick did and applying that to reaching the West again for Christianity. And you can kind of hear in there some of it, knowing their language, knowing the people, not making them change to your culture before sharing the gospel with them and leading them to Christ. All stuff that we probably should be considering when we are now in this age of Aquarius, as the New Age hippies like to call it. All right, guys, maybe that's something you can, I don't know, dig into a little bit more, get some fun stuff out of, see and learn from saints that have gone before. And when I say saints there, I mean holy ones, people that have faith in Jesus Christ, not this Roman Catholic, we got some special title saint because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Not good there. But look to the saints before, like Hebrews 11 talks about, and Hebrews 12 talks about, focusing on the saint, Jesus Christ. Hopefully you can get some good stuff out of it, guys. Hopefully I can give you something else to think about and celebrate on St. Patrick's Day instead of getting righteously drunk and throwing up in the Boston River or whatever that Lutheran satire video said people do on St. Patrick's Day.